Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we've got a couple of things to discuss, including a couple of signings by a couple of UFAs. We also got some pretty substantial news with the Arizona Coyotes discussing their possible arena situation going forward. We also have a couple of trade rumors to discuss involving the Carolina Hurricanes, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the Calgary Flames. I'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here at the Internet Talk Channel. Now, as usual, I'll kick things off today by discussing a couple of signings that have happened over the past couple of days. There's been actually quite a few signings over the past couple of days, just two, but they were both for some pretty big UFAs that were still on the market. So first, with New Jersey Devils, they have signed defenseman Cal Foote to a one-year, two-way deal with an AAV of $800,000. And once again, the deal starts at the beginning of this year. So for Foote, that's a really good deal, getting him signed to an $800,000 deal. He's played last year with both Nashville and Tampa Bay. He played in Nashville after a trade line, started in Tampa Bay. He shows he was a good 7th-8th defenseman, went to Nashville, got a little bit more playing time, but was still not a really solid defenseman. The Preds didn't really have much need for him because after they did not qualify him, they went on free agency and got Luke Schenn. So they currently have 4 really good quality right shot defensemen, so they didn't need Foote. So they let him go, did not qualify him as RFA, and Foote's been a UFA ever since the start of free agency. So definitely, I think him getting an opportunity here with the Devils is not too bad. I know he was part of that 2018 World Junior team that's under investigation right now for all of the allegations that are against them. So the Devils must be pretty confident that Foote's not one of the players who was a part of that. So they wanted to sign him to a new extension. Another cool thing is both Cal Foote and his brother Nolan Foote were drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Nolan's also with the Devils. Nolan Foote was one of the pieces that the Devils were able to get in the Blake Coleman deal that sent Blake Coleman to Tampa a number of years ago. That helped that Tampa Bay Lightning team make that solid third line that helped them get to the Cup. So Cal Foote once again reunites with his brother in New Jersey, so that's another good thing to see. The defense is pretty stacked with the Devils. Like I said, I see Nemec, Hamilton, and Marino be the top 3 right shot defensemen. So I could see Foote be the 7th defenseman on that team. I could also see Foote maybe go down in the minors. It is a 2-way deal, so he could be placed on waivers sent to the minors and wait for a call-up opportunity. So I think it's definitely a possibility, but definitely, I think signing Cal Foote, who's a decent right shot defenseman, former first-round pick back in 2017, I think that's a really good signing for the Devils, and I think Foote should definitely be a really good addition there for the Devils. So probably not going to get a regular NHL role, probably going to be like a 7th-8th defenseman, but still, Foote's a really good defender, and I think if he can show that he's really good, he might be able to get a couple of opportunities this season. So a really good signing there. And then for the Toronto Maple Leafs, they signed goaltender Martin Jones to a 1-year, one-way deal with the AAV of $875,000. Now, this got a lot of people talking. Jones was probably the best goalie free agent on the market. There were a lot of people questioning why would the Leafs do this, especially since they already got Joseph Woll and Ilya Samsonov. And the question is because the Leafs really want a solid NHL level third-string goaltender. It seems to be something that the teams are doing. I mean, the Penguins did it with a guy like Magnus Hellberg. The Red Wings did it this year after signing Alex Lyon. They like having a good insurance option in case one of their goaltenders get injured. And especially in Toronto, Samsonov was injured a couple of times last year due to injuries. Woll, a couple of years ago, did have a lot of injury troubles. So it's definitely a really good option there for the Leafs to get Jones, so he can help them in case of injuries. Jones was a really good goaltender for the Kraken. His stats weren't fantastic, but he did get a lot of wins for Seattle and did help them make the playoffs. So he'll probably be placed on waivers, sent down to the minors, and play with the Marlies to start the season. But if there's injuries, he can definitely come up and be a good solid backup to either Woll or Samsonov. So that's a really good signing in my opinion. I think Jones will be a fantastic third-string goalie for the Leafs. And if he can do well, maybe he can get a better contract next year. But for the time being, they'll still run with a tandem of Samsonov and Woll, and it's just going to be Jones be the third stringer And after he sends down waivers and he plays with the Marlies, if they run into injury troubles, you can definitely bet that Jones is going to be the one who they call up. So going to be interesting to see. It's going to be hard to sneak him down on waivers because he's a solid goaltender who could even be a backup at the NHL level. So it might be a bit difficult to sneak him on waivers. But I do think that the Leafs should be able to have him clear waivers, and then they'll be able to use him with their third stringer in case of an injury to Samsonov or Wall. So solid signing there for the Leafs. Going over to the update I want to talk about here with the Arizona Coyotes. Now, there was a statement released yesterday that said that the Arizona Coyotes owner Alex Morello sent a letter of intent to buy property in Mesa, Arizona of around 41 acres to develop the land to become a new entertainment district to get a new arena for the Arizona Coyotes in that sort of location. And it says that they are still also looking at places in Scottsdale and Phoenix for possible options as well. So this is a good step forward, I think, for the Arizona Coyotes and all of their fans. I think it's possible this could be a good step in the right direction for the Arizona Coyotes. There's not very much optimism after they lost the Tempe Arena vote. There was mention just after that Tempe Arena vote, that Mesa was a possible option, and they were looking at several pieces of land in Arizona to try and get a new arena district. And I think this is a really good step in the right direction. Now, a letter of intent is not anything substantial. He's not buying the land. He's not doing anything like that. He's just saying that there's a letter of intent. He intends to buy it. So hopefully, it's a step in the right direction. He can buy it. The Coyotes said that they'd be hoping that it's ready for the 2026-27 season. That would be a huge win for them. I think when they were originally doing the Tempe Arena, that was sort of the end game there too. I think it might have been the 25-26 season, but it was around that sort of time frame. So, I mean, if they can buy it, they can get the shovels in the ground soon, they can start building it. I think they said that arena possibility doesn't have to have a referendum, which really hurt them last year. So, I think it's quite likely that this is a really good step in the right direction. But we've also heard this a ton of times in the past, and it might not work. So I think it's quite possible it could work. I think if they were able to buy it, it might be a really good step in the right direction. But I'm not 100% confident with the Arizona Coyotes here. I think it's quite possible they could go look at Mesa. Also, the fact that they only submitted a letter of intent and they haven't bought the property yet has me a little bit concerned. Also, that they're still looking for other places in Scottsdale and Phoenix, and from what I've seen a couple people say, it doesn't sound like Mesa is the best place for a hockey arena. So it's definitely interesting to see, but I definitely think it's quite possible that this could be a step in the right direction. But just the fact that they haven't bought anything yet and they're still looking for other places just has me a little bit concerned. Also, the fact that we've seen Arizona go through a lot of possible arena options, and they've exhausted a lot of options as well, and nothing's really worked for them. So I still have my concerns about this possibility. On top of that, we'll keep them in Mullet Arena until the 26-27 season. Does the NHL really want to be playing the Arizona Coyotes in a 5,000 arena for the next 3 years? I don't think that's really a really liked possibility for the Arizona Coyotes. On top of that, Gary Bettman, on an interview in either May or June, did discuss this and said that the Arizona Coyotes needed to have something firm in place by the middle of the season, so December, January, February, somewhere around there. They need to have something concrete to move forward. So if they are able to buy the land and they're able to move forward with this, maybe it's the opportunity they are looking for. But I still have my doubts, and I think if they are not able to buy the land or something, they definitely do expect the NHL to still possibly consider relocation. I still think if this doesn't work out for the Arizona Coyotes, a relocation maybe to a place like Salt Lake City is still extremely likely. But hopefully this is a step in the right direction. Hopefully Arizona can stay in Arizona. Like I said, I still think, given the fact it's only a letter of intent, it's not them buying the property. I still have my concerns. Given the fact that 3 years down the road, does the NHL really want to spend 3 more years in the 5,000-seat arena, Mullet Arena? I'm not exactly sure that's a possibility that the NHL likes. Also, another thing that I think I've seen a lot of people say is that this statement happened a couple of days before the ticket sales went on for the Arizona Coyotes. So I've seen a couple of people say that this is maybe just something to help people buy tickets in Arizona to see like they have a future. I'm not exactly sure that's 100% true, but that might be partially true. So it's definitely interesting to see. But I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments about Arizona. Does this letter of intent mean that they should be able to stay in Arizona, or do you, like me, still have your concerns about Arizona and still think that if they aren't able to find something in the next couple of months, if they aren't able to get this purchased and going through, this could be the last attempt to keep Arizona in Arizona? And if they aren't able to get this done, they may have to consider relocation. That's just my take. I still think relocation to possibly Salt Lake City is extremely likely, especially if they aren't able to get anything done here in Arizona in the next couple of months before the halfway point of the season. So going to be interesting to see, but that's the update on the Arizona Coyotes. And lastly, here we go over to the trade rumor part of the video. Now, there are 3 trade rumors I want to discuss here today. First was the Pittsburgh Penguins. I've seen a couple of reports from Penguins media recently speculating that the Penguins could look to add on the blue line. I know they just did that with the big Erik Karlsson acquisition this week, but it looks like they have some troubles with their depths. Now, if you look at their depth right now, they have Ryan Graves, Marcus Pettersson, the top 2 left defensemen, Letang and Karlsson, the top 2 right shot defensemen. That's a really good top 4. Of some of the top 4s in the NHL, that's a really good top 4. But if you look at their depth, it's not fantastic. They got rid of Ruda, they got rid of Petrie, they didn't bring back Dumoulin in the free agency. They've lost a couple of pieces. So if you look at their team, they have Pierre-Olivier Joseph, who's a solid third-pair defenseman. He plays on the left side. They also have Ty Smith, who's a good young player, but he also plays on the left side. You have Chad Ruhwedel, who's more of a 6th, 7th defenseman, maybe a guy who should be a scratch a couple of games a season. He is probably their best right shot defenseman. And then you also have Mark Friedman, who's more of a left shot defenseman as well. So if you look at that team, you have Chad Ruhwedel as your top right shot defenseman. You could use Ty Smith on the right side if you wanted to, but your top right shot defense on the third pair would be Chad Ruhwedel. And if Karlsson or Letang, who do have injury history, get injured, you're going to need to use Chad Ruhwedel in their top 4. And I don't think that's something that the Pittsburgh Penguins would really want to do. So it seems like Kyle Dubas is looking to try and add some sort of a defenseman. It looks like he could add a defenseman on maybe like a cheap contract, or maybe bring someone to a PTO. I mean, there's still a couple of decent defensemen. Like, I know he's not going to be there for the start of game 1, but I think a guy like Ethan Bear could definitely help that team. If Bear was willing to sign something for like under $1 million, they could place him in long-term injury reserve to start the season. And once he gets back, maybe they have enough space, they are able to put him into the lineup as like a third-pair defenseman. I think Bear could be a really good fit in Pittsburgh. So that would be an option. I know he's not a right shot defenseman, but he can play on the right side, and that's Caleb Jones. He's still another really good defenseman. If he signs for under $1 million, I could see him be a good fit there in Pittsburgh. I will say Cal Foote would be a pretty good fit there, the third-pair defenseman too, but Jersey's already signed him. So I think there's still a couple of options out there. Maybe a guy like Nick Holden. Holden's more of a left shot defenseman too, but he can't play on the right side as well. So there's still a couple of defensemen out there who could possibly wind up being really good right shot defensemen for the Penguins. Maybe they go on the trade market and try and find a depth defenseman. I think that's a possibility as well. But it sounds like their depth on the right side especially is really, really weak after all the trades that they've made. And they could look to either sign someone to a cheaper one-year deal, maybe a two-way deal. They could also look to maybe doing a small trade. They don't have much cap space, so maybe they're able to move out one of their contracts to acquire someone who's on a cheaper deal. Maybe they sign someone to a PTO and bring him over to training camp and see if he can work out there. But going to be interesting to see. I definitely think that this is going to be an interesting situation to watch, but I definitely do agree that with Ruhwedel as their best right shot defenseman besides Letang and Karlsson, if they run into injury troubles with one of those two players, they're going to be in a pretty big pickle. So in my opinion, I think it's extremely likely that the Penguins at least try to add one cheap defenseman, whether it be on a signing, a PTO, or possibly a small trade. Going over to the Calgary Flames, David Pagnotta did an appearance on the NHL Network. and he was talking about a few things. One of them was the Calgary Flames and Elias Lindholm. Now, he said that although there have been a lot of Flames this year who have said that they are not really willing to sign with the Calgary Flames, Tyler Toffoli being one who's already been moved, Noah Hanifin, who's speculated to be most likely moved before the start of the season, Mikael Backlund, who said that he wants to wait until the end of the season to talk about a contract extension. Not sure about Tana Zadorov's stance on if they want to sign an extension or if they want to move on, but we know that the Flames have had a lot of players who said that they want to be gone and leave Calgary in the last little while. But it does sound like Elias Lindholm is willing to stay. Unlike a lot of people have thought that Lindholm will most likely be traded because he's not willing to sign an extension, it sounds, according to David Pagnotta, like Lindholm is willing to sign an extension. It sounds like he definitely does want to stay with the Calgary Flames. He likes what they have there. It just seems like the problem holding up Elias Lindholm extension is the contract negotiations. It sounds like the Calgary Flames are currently coming in with an 8-year deal at around $8.25 million, so 8.25, 8.3, somewhere around there in the low 8s. And it sounds like if Elias Lindholm values himself, which I think is pretty accurate, at around $9 million, maybe just a slight bit above. So, in my opinion, Lindholm's a really good player. I think the Flames are valuing him a little bit lower at sort of like just under Bo Horvat money, probably between like Bo Horvat and Roope Hintz or Robert Thomas, somewhere in that range where it's between like 8.1 and 8.5. I think that's pretty good because those are pretty good comparisons in Thomas and Horvat. But I think given the fact that Lindholm is a really good player who a couple of years ago had a really good point per game season, you could say that he has some sort of comparable numbers as a top-line center to a guy like Sebastian Aho, who just signed an 8-year, $9.75 million extension a couple weeks ago. I could definitely see the reasoning for Lindholm wanting to get over $9 million. I think on the open market, Lindholm could probably get between $9.5 and maybe $10.5 million. So I definitely think if he was to sign for maybe like a $9.3 and $9.6 million, that'll probably be interesting to him. But it sounds like the Flames and him are pretty far apart, at least $750,000 between 8.25 and $9 million. So it sounds like that's sort of the hole up there on a Lindholm trade. It sounds like Lindholm does want to extend. He will be willing to sign long-term, just like Kadri did, just like Huberdeau did, just like Weegar did. He will be willing to remain as the top-line center, but it just sounds like the Flames want to sign him to a lower-end 8 times $8.25 million deal, and he wants a $9 million deal. So they're going to have to bridge the gap. I'm not sure if they'll be able to work together and sort of bridge the gap, maybe get somewhere closer to like 8.5, 8.6, maybe 8.7. But I definitely think that if the Flames really do want to sign Lindholm, they may have to buckle a bit here and give him somewhere close to $9 million. So, going to be interesting to see here, but it sounds like Lindholm does really want to stay with Calgary, and it's just the contract terms that are sort of holding up him signing an extension. And lastly here with the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, we talked about in our last video after the Karlsson trade that a lot of attention will most likely be turning to Hanifin now that the Erik Karlsson trade is done. I think a lot of attention could also turn to a guy like Brett Pesce in Carolina. Now, we know that Pesce was a guy who was being mentioned as a possible trade option by the Carolina Hurricanes because contract negotiations have not gone well. Carolina always sets a price for a player, and if the player thinks that he's valued it more, it sounds like they don't want to sign him to that value, and they'd be willing to let him go. So it sounds like Pesce maybe wants something between like maybe $5.5 and $6.5 million, and I don't think that the Carolina Hurricanes want to go that high, so they haven't been able to work out a contract extension yet. At this point in time, the Carolina Hurricanes may just go into the season with Pesce unsigned. They have an extremely lethal forward group right now. They have Burns and Slavin as their top pair. They have Pesce, D'Angelo, Shea, and Orlov as their other 4 defensemen. So that's an extremely good top 6 D core. But the big problem is, 1, you're going into the season without Pesce being signed. 2, they could still use some help on the forward group. And 3, you have a solid third pair defenseman in Jalen Chatfield, and even Dylan Coughlin, who could definitely step into the third pair role and do really good. So they have a really good defense. They could use Chatfield, the third pair defenseman, and they could still use an upgrade on the forward side. So I think if they could use Pesce as a trade option to maybe get them another forward who can help them score, I think they would definitely do that. Now, I don't see them having the ability to go after a lethal guy. I think they could go after a guy like Lindholm. I think they could go after a guy like Nylander. I'm just not sure that they would be able to with their current contract situations and stuff like that. So I think it's a possibility, but I would not be overly shocked if it wasn't able to happen. So looking through some of the league, I've pinpointed 6 teams who I think would be open to possibly acquiring Pesce and would be able to give the Carolina Hurricanes a forward in return that would maybe be able to pull off a trade. So there are 6 teams that I think could have an interest in a defensive defenseman like Pesce. First, the Florida Panthers. We know that they've already done a lot on their blue line, but I could definitely see him have interest in Pesce. Imagine once Ekblad and Montour get back, you have a top 4 of Ekblad, Montour, Forsling, and Pesce. That's a solid top 4. I think it would have to take Sam Reinhart to pull off a deal. Maybe Reinhart goes to Carolina for like Pesce and maybe like a 4th round pick. I think that would be a decent trade. They would be able to get Sam Reinhart, who's a really good goal scorer and can definitely fit in that top 6. So that could be a trade I could see. The Buffalo Sabres, we know, have been in the market for a top 4 defenseman. They could use the guy who plays more on the right side, given the fact that Dahlin, Power, and Samuelsson are all more natural lefties. So if they are able to get Pesce, maybe they move a guy like Victor Olofsson, who's already proven he can put up 25, 30 goals a season. So maybe they do like Olofsson in a 3rd round pick for Pesce. Maybe that sort of works for those 2 teams. We know that Stars have been linked to Hanifin in the past. We know they've been linked to Jeff Petrie recently. I could see him have interest in a guy like Brett Pesce to play in that top 4 with guys like Suter and Heiskanen and Lindell. If they could move a guy like Mason Marchment to the Canes, not the best of goal scorers, but still a pretty decent middle 6 forward, I think they would definitely like that. Maybe Marchment and maybe like a 3rd or 4th round pick for a Brett Pesce. That could be a possible trade option. I'm not sure Pesce, given the fact he has a 15 no-team trade list, would be wanting to go to San Jose, but we know that the Sharks have a hole on the right side of their defense. We know that they have an abundance of forwards, so maybe if the Sharks were to move a guy like Barabanov or LeBanc, maybe paired with a pick for Pesce, that would be a possibility. I could even see the Carolina Hurricanes have some interest in Logan Couture. Couture's a solid second-line center. Imagine having Couture and Aho as your top 2 centers. That would be a lethal 1-2 punch down the middle. The only problem is I don't think the Sharks really want to use the retained salary slot at this point in time. And given the fact he has an $8 million cap hit, that might be a trade that happens more next year. Also, Couture has a trade protection, only allows him to be traded to possibly 3 teams without his consent. So, going to be interesting to see, but I think if they could make it work, maybe Pesce for Couture, but it would be extremely difficult, so maybe they try and move like Pesce for LeBanc or Barabanov. But that would only be if Pesce would be willing to go to San Jose. Vancouver, we know, has a need for right-shot defensemen, especially if they were to move Tyler Myers to San Jose. We know if they were to acquire LeBanc, they would need to move out a winger. We already know they need to move out a winger anyway. So maybe they try and do something where they move a guy like Connor Garland in a 3rd round pick for Brett Pesce. That'll be possibly a really good option. Pesce is a defensive defenseman. Put him with Quinn Hughes. I think that could be a really good top pair in Vancouver. So that could be an option in my opinion. Another option would be the Seattle Kraken. We know that they could use a little more of a defensive upgrade. They have a couple of decent forwards. Maybe they do like Alex Wennberg, who could be a good solid 2nd-line center, or Eli Tolvanen, who had a really good season last year. Maybe pair with a pick. Move that to Carolina for a guy like Brett Pesce. That would be another improvement for the Kraken blue line. So, in my opinion, I think there's needs in Florida, Buffalo, Dallas, Vancouver, Seattle, and San Jose right now for a top 4 right-shot defenseman who could definitely fit into their lineup. And I think all those 6 teams could have interest in Pesce. And all of those 6 teams do have a forward that they could give up off their roster that I think would have some interest by the Carolina Hurricanes. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I think along with Hanifin, Pesce is going to be a name we need to watch out for before the season starts. I think both Pesce and Hanifin have an extremely good likely chance to possibly be moved before the season starts. So it's going to be interesting to see. I definitely do expect Pesce to, at the very least, draw some attention from around the NHL. and I think it's quite likely that Pesce could wind up being dealt before the season starts. So, going to be interested to see. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments on all that was discussed today. Once again, what do you think about the Arizona thing? Are they able to wind up buying the property after saying that they have a letter of intent to buy the Mesa 41-acre property to build an arena on? Or is this just another one of their options that they're probably not going to happen? They're going to have to relocate at some point in the future. Definitely let me know what you think on that. Also, let me know what you think about the Pittsburgh Penguins. Do they wind up getting a cheaper defenseman who can play on the right side, possibly if a guy like Karlsson were to go down before the season starts, or do you think that their cap constraints are going to hold them back too much? Does Lindholm get his contract extension? If so, what sort of contract extension do you think he signs? Is it closer to 8.5? Is it closer to 9? Is it above 9? Definitely let me know what you think. And if he doesn't sign his contract extension, does he get dealt? And if so, where do you think he goes? And do you think the Canadiens move Brett Pesce? And if so, what sort of team do you think would be the best fit for Pesce? And where do you think the Canadiens can move him so they could get the best return package? But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really liked it, remember to subscribe down below. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so definitely check that out. I have a link down in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.